Welcome to Watch Mojo, and today we're exploring the dark reality of prison, the people who ended up there, those that are still serving time, and the shocking things that unfolded behind bars. And we're starting with killers who turned prison into their next crime scene.
Do you remember when you learned that your father murdered Jeffrey Dahmer?
Yes. It was about 10, I saw it on TV.
Welcome to Watch Mojo, and today we're looking at the most chilling instances of convicted murderers who reverted to their old ways while locked up behind bars.
Schaefer carries to the grave confessions? Maybe where the bodies were?
Robert O'Neill. In February 1980, Robert O'Neill was sentenced to life in prison for murdering 78-year-old Ralph Roscoe Sherrick. The previous year, O'Neill had broken into the home of Sherrick's son-in-law, where he encountered and fatally shot him after robbing the house. While serving his sentence at the Missouri State Penitentiary, O'Neill joined the white supremacist group, the Aryan Brotherhood. His disruptive behavior in prison led to him being locked up in a special unit reserved for the most dangerous inmates. On February 3, 1984, he and two other prisoners attacked Arthur Dade, a black man serving time for armed robbery, and O'Neill fatally stabbed him with a homemade ice pick. He was ultimately convicted of capital murder for the attack and executed by lethal injection. Wyatt Busby.
Busby is 7 years into a 50-year sentence for murder and has a lengthy history of violent convictions.
Wyatt Busby was convicted of murder for the fatal stabbing of a man in Houston, Texas back in 2016. He received a 50-year sentence and was serving his term at the Cofield unit in Texas. While there, Busby shared a cell with suspected serial killer Billy Shamirmir. Between 2016 and 2018, Shamirmir allegedly murdered at least 18 women in Dallas and was convicted of 2 of those killings.
It took years to uncover the murders because the deaths were not considered suspicious at the time due to the age of the victims.
On September 19, 2023, the 2 cellmates got into a verbal confrontation which escalated into a physical altercation after Shamirmir reportedly made inappropriate comments about Busby's children. Prison guards were seemingly slow to intervene, allowing the situation to spiral out of control. By the time the 2 men were separated, Busby had killed Shamirmir.
Those who wanted justice for their loved ones don't feel sorry for the convicted serial killer.
Sunil Ratti. Indian gangster Sunil Ratti stumbled into a life of crime after his father's murder in 1999. 3 people were accused of the killing, and within 6 months, Ratti had tracked down and killed 2 of them, brothers Mehek and Mohkam Singh. These acts of retaliation landed him in prison for life. In 2018, Ratti was transferred to the Bagpat District Jail after claiming his life was at risk at the previous facility. At Bagpat, he crossed paths with Muna Bajrangi, an infamous gang leader and contract killer with political ties. Bajrangi had reportedly made denigrating comments about Ratti's appearance, which angered him. As a result, Ratti fatally shot Bajrangi on July 9, 2018, using a gun he had smuggled into the jail. Kevin Roby. If you watch the early films of director John Singleton, you might recognize actor Lloyd Avery II, who played gangsters in Boys in the Hood and Poetic Justice.
What a punk! What a fool!
The line between fiction and reality soon blurred as Avery became a real-life criminal and received a life sentence in 2001 for a double homicide. Behind bars, Avery shared a cell with Kevin Roby, who was also serving a life sentence for sexually assaulting and murdering his sister. While Avery appeared to embrace a new path in prison, becoming a born-again Christian, Roby turned to Satanism. On September 4, 2005, Roby murdered Avery in what he claimed was a satanic ritual. Shockingly, prison guards did not discover Avery's body until 2 days later. Joseph Druce. Reverend John Gagin was a central figure in the Catholic Church's sexual misconduct scandal in Boston. Gagin was accused of inappropriate conduct with nearly 150 youths over a 30-year period. Ultimately, he was convicted of indecent assault and battery and sentenced to 9 to 10 years behind bars.
66-year-old defrocked priest John Gagin struggled to hold back his emotions after a jury convicted him.
In prison, Gagin met Joseph Druce, a fellow inmate serving a life sentence for murdering a man who allegedly made unwanted sexual advances at him. Druce was reportedly a victim of sexual misconduct in his childhood and was said to be outraged by Gagin's apparent lack of remorse. On August 23, 2003, Druce attacked and killed Gagin in his cell.
It was in my head. He brought everything back out of me that I tried to push away.
Although he pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity, Druce was ultimately convicted of first-degree murder.
The psychiatrist, got up there and said he was the most insane person he's ever seen. He really had no clue what was going on.
Jimmy Mack. The death row section of prisons holds some of the most dangerous individuals in existence. In 1999, Donald Leroy Evans and Jimmy Mack were among those housed on death row at Mississippi State Penitentiary.
2 days ago, a 12-member jury sentenced Donald Leroy Evans to death by lethal injection.
Evans was a notorious serial killer who is believed to have claimed up to 70 victims, although the exact number remains unknown. He was sentenced to death in 1993 for the sexual assault and murder of a minor.
Evans says he killed 72 people during the 1970s and 80s. He even led the FBI on a 2-day search for bodies in the Arizona desert, but they found nothing.
Mack, on the other hand, landed on death row for the 1990 murder of a man in Bolivar County, Mississippi. In January 1999, Mack attacked Evans with a shank, fatally stabbing him while he was leaving the shower area. He was convicted of manslaughter and received an additional 20 years to his sentence. Victor Castigador. Dubbed the Killer from Manila, Victor Castigador was imprisoned in 1989 for the murders of 2 security guards in London. The crime, infamously referred to as the Human Torch murders, earned Castigador a whole life sentence, essentially ensuring he would never be released. Among his fellow inmates at Long Lartin Prison was Sidonio Teixeira, who was also serving a whole life sentence for killing his daughter and attempting to murder his son. While little is known about their relationship in prison, things came to a head in June 2016 when Castigador fatally attacked Teixeira with a rock inside a sock during a workshop. Castigador was handed another whole life sentence and transferred to a top security prison, where he died in March 2017. Vincent Faustino Rivera. The murders that took Vincent Faustino Rivera to prison occurred in Tampa, Florida in 1990. Rivera was convicted of killing 2 people just 10 days apart and sentenced to life at the Florida State Prison. Also incarcerated there was Gerard John Schaefer, otherwise known as the Killer Cop.
I never thought that I would be that close to someone who was capable of doing those things.
A former sheriff's deputy, Schaefer gained notoriety in the early 70s for the murder of 2 girls. Although he became a prime suspect in over 20 additional killings, he was only convicted of those 2. In 1995, Rivera and Schaefer reportedly argued over a cup of hot water, which resulted in Rivera fatally stabbing Schaefer in his cell.
Schaefer carries to the grave confessions. Maybe where the bodies were?
However, rumors suggest that the murder was likely a targeted hit due to Schaefer's reputation as a prison informant. Rigoberto Sanchez Velasco. In 1988, Rigoberto Sanchez Velasco stood trial for the murder of his girlfriend's daughter 2 years earlier. He had confessed to the crime shortly after it occurred, only to later recant. Nevertheless, he was found guilty and sentenced to death. But Sanchez Velasco never seemed to change his ways, even as he sat on death row. In 1995, he and another prisoner, Mario Lara, attacked 2 fellow death row inmates, Edwin B. Caprat III and Charles Street, in the yard, in full view of prison guards and other witnesses. Both men later succumbed to their injuries. This violent act earned Sanchez Velasco 2 additional 15-year sentences. In October 2002, he was executed by lethal injection for his initial crime. Christopher Scarver.
Do you remember when you learned that your father murdered Jeffrey Dahmer?
Yes. It was about 10, I saw it on TV.
One of the most notorious serial killers in history was Jeffrey Dahmer, who claimed 17 victims over a 13-year period and was sentenced to 16 life terms.
People try to understand how this could have happened in their midst. How did Jeffrey Dahmer get away with murder after murder for 13 years?
Dahmer was imprisoned at the Columbia Correctional Institution in Wisconsin, which also housed Christopher Scarver. Scarver was serving a life sentence for the 1990 murder of a man during an armed robbery. Dahmer and Scarver worked together in the prison gymnasium, alongside Jesse Anderson, who was convicted of murdering his wife. While cleaning the gym on November 28, 1994, all 3 got into a heated argument that culminated in Scarver killing both Dahmer and Anderson with a metal bar. He received 2 more life sentences for these murders, and was subsequently placed in solitary confinement. What other killers never changed their spots even behind bars?
You know what I mean? So be it.
Designed to contain the worst of the worst, maximum security prisons are fortresses built for chaos. Here now are criminals who call maximum security home,
saying that he's serving his term under the most severe administrative measures in maximum security.
Welcome to WatchMojo, and today we're looking at 20 notorious criminals who are currently housed inside inescapable maximum security institutions.
His brain is definitely wired differently. He's a psychopath.
Sirhan.
On May 18th of last year, you were sitting and writing in your room.
They are the writings of a maniac.
They're the writings of Sirhan.
Yes, but they're not the writings of me now, sir. I'm not mentally ill, sir, but I'm not perfect either.
One of the most infamous assassins in modern history, Sirhan was responsible for shooting Senator Robert F. Kennedy on June 5, 1968. While Kennedy survived the initial shooting, his injuries were too severe, and he died the next day at Los Angeles' Good Samaritan Hospital. Sirhan was originally sentenced to death, but this was commuted to life in prison following a landmark court case in 1972. On November 22, 2013, coincidentally the 50th anniversary of the death of Robert's brother John F. Kennedy, Sirhan was transferred to the Richard J. Donovan Correctional Facility outside San Diego, where he remains to this day. Funnily enough, Sirhan was actually granted parole in August 2021, but this was blocked by California Governor Gavin Newsom.
This one's more impactful because it has an impact around the rest of the world. It's impactful because it had a direct impact on 11 family members, 11 children of Robert Kennedy. It changed the course of history.
James Marcello.
Was he convicted under the statute that Davis was talking about, the Supreme Court was talking about? Can it be applied retroactively? And it wouldn't make any difference to him anyway, because his crimes were so serious, they could easily have yielded a life imprisonment sentence, even without this.
The Chicago outfit has a long and storied history, dating back to 1910 and once being led by famous mobster Al Capone. Fast forward a number of decades to the early 2000s, and the outfit was being led by one James Marcello, aka Little Jimmy. Marcello was a central target of the FBI's Operation Family Secrets, and was ultimately convicted on many serious mob-related charges, including racketeering, conspiracy, and involvement in multiple murders. He is currently housed inside ADX Florence, a notorious Supermax prison in Colorado that is virtually impenetrable, and which houses the most dangerous criminals in America.
Judy, James Marcello has had multiple mob nicknames. He's always favored Jimmy the Man, but at age 76 and residing in the nation's toughest prison, perhaps lately he's felt more like Little Jimmy, the name many of his underlings dared to use behind his back.
Damian Williams.
What was it like 30 years ago? Well, it was something you simply never forget.
You might not know the name, but you probably know the crime. On August 29, 1992, Los Angeles was in the midst of the famous Rodney King riots when truck driver Reginald Denny was pulled from his vehicle and beaten on live television by a group now called the LA Four. This group contained Damian Williams, who was affiliated with local Crips. Williams became nationally recognized for attacking Denny, and especially for throwing a cinder block at his head and knocking him unconscious. Williams served 4 years in prison for the assault, but he struggled to stay out of trouble and was later convicted of murdering drug dealer Grover Tinner in 2000. He is currently serving 46 years to life in California State Prison, Centinela.
Within seconds, his door was ripped open. Mr. Denny was pulled from the vehicle, and he was beaten. He was kicked.
James Holmes.
For a lot of survivors that I talk to, it's like on that day, the day that's the anniversary or tragiversary as some people call it, that's the day they just want to shut down and quiet out the world and not talk to anybody.
On July 20th, 2012, dozens of people packed into Aurora, Colorado's Century 16 movie theater to watch The Dark Knight Rises. Unfortunately, that's where James Holmes decided to enact a horrible plan. Suffering from severe mental illness, Holmes entered the theater with multiple firearms and canisters of tear gas. He threw the gas into the crowd before opening fire, killing 12 and injuring 62. 8 more would become injured while attempting to flee the theater. Holmes pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity, but his defense argument didn't work against the jury, and he was given 12 life sentences plus an additional 3,318 years in prison. He is currently held in USP Allenwood in Pennsylvania.
Convicted murderer, theater shooter James Holmes sentenced to more than 3,300 years in prison today. That's on top of the 12 life sentences he's already serving. The judge sentencing Holmes to 48 years in prison for each count of attempted first-degree murder, 32 years for each count of second-degree attempted murder, and another 6 years for the booby traps he left in an apartment.
Gary Ridgway.
You're a loser, you're a coward,
You're a nobody. You're an animal.
These are relatives of victims of the Green River Killer.
May God have mercy on your pathetic soul, because the rest of us who know the truth about you won't.
One of the most prolific serial killers in history, Gary Ridgway was known as the Green River Killer and was convicted of murdering 49 people throughout the 1980s and 90s. However, his true body count could be much higher, with Ridgway himself claiming to have murdered 71. Regardless, Ridgway was given 49 life sentences, one for each confirmed victim, and is imprisoned in Washington State Penitentiary. Given the nickname The Walls, Washington State is an enormous and historically violent prison that dates back to the 1880s. It even housed Washington's death row inmates and carried out its executions before the state abolished capital punishment.
Now, no death penalty in the state of Washington. Governor Jay Inslee today signed away capital punishment, making permanent the moratorium on executions that he ordered back in 2014.
David Berkowitz.
They all bought it, David. Didn't they? Even the shrinks. Especially the shrinks.
Another notorious serial killer, David Berkowitz is perhaps better known as the Son of Sam. Between July 1976 and July 1977, Berkowitz terrorized the already gritty streets of New York, targeting and shooting random people with his .44 special caliber Bulldog revolver. 6 people were killed in the shootings, and many more were injured. As a result, Berkowitz became the target of the largest manhunt in the city's history. They finally caught him on August 10, 1977, and he pleaded guilty to 6 counts of second-degree murder, resulting in 6 consecutive life sentences. He was moved around various New York prisons, including Attica, which he referred to as, quote, a nightmare, and is currently imprisoned in the Shawangunk Correctional Facility.
People would never understand where I came from. No matter how much I try to explain it, they wouldn't understand what it was to walk in darkness.
Ramzi Youssef.
One World Trade Center, New York City. Friday, February 26, 1993. The basement garage was a scene of utter destruction, cloaked in thickening smoke.
A notable terrorist, Ramzi Youssef is widely remembered as the main perpetrator and mastermind of the 1993 World Trade Center bombing. On February 26, 1993, Youssef and accomplices parked a Ryder truck loaded with a homemade bomb in the building's underground parking garage. The resulting explosion killed 6 and injured well over 1,000. Despite the massive damage, Youssef failed in his primary goal, which was to completely collapse the North Tower, thereby killing thousands. He was finally captured after years on the run and was given 2 life sentences plus 240 years. He is currently inside ADX Florence, in a cell block commonly known as Bombers Row.
3 months after their convictions, on May 24, 1994, Judge Kevin Duffy sentenced each bomber to a year in prison for each year of life he had deprived the victims. It came to 240 years apiece, with no possibility of parole.
Eric Rudolph.
Eric Rudolph is not a folk hero.
He has not been proven guilty.
He's nothing more than a cold-blooded murderer.
Joining Ramzi Youssef on Bombers Row is Eric Rudolph, the perpetrator of the Centennial Olympic Park bombing. The 1996 Summer Olympics were being held in Atlanta, and Rudolph saw an opportunity. According to his manifesto, he wished to, quote, confound, anger, and embarrass the Washington government. So, he targeted Centennial Olympic Park with a homemade bomb, killing 1 person directly and injuring 111. The damage would have been much greater if it wasn't for the efforts of security guard Richard Jewell, who noticed the suspicious backpack and helped clear the surrounding area. Rudolph committed additional bombings in Alabama and Georgia before he was caught and arrested. He was given 4 consecutive life sentences.
And I believe he will be taken with no confrontation. It might be a year from now, or it might be tomorrow. I don't know. But I'll assure you, he will be caught.
Mark David Chapman.
This evening, John Lennon arrived at the emergency room at the Roosevelt Hospital. He was dead at the time of his arrival.
December 8, 1980. As John Lennon entered the archway of the Dakota, Mark David Chapman shot him 4 times from behind. While Lennon was rushed to the hospital, Chapman stayed behind. calmly reading a book until the police arrived. Unfortunately, Lennon did not survive the trip to the hospital. The world entered a period of mourning while Chapman went through rigorous psychiatric evaluations, with many experts finding him mentally ill. However, Chapman pled guilty, believing that it was the will of God, and he was given 20 years to life. He spent most of his time in Attica, but he transferred in 2022 to the maximum security Greenhaven Correctional Facility. He has also been denied parole 13 times.
I was standing there with a gun in my pocket.
Knew you were going to shoot him?
Sorry?
Knew you were going to shoot him?
Absolutely.
Dzhokhar Tsarnaev.
Come on out! Come on, Dzhokhar, let's go!
Tamerlan Tsarnaev and his brother Dzhokhar planned and orchestrated the Boston Marathon bombing in 2013. The brothers placed 2 homemade pressure cooker bombs along the finish line, both of which successfully exploded. 3 people died in the initial bombing, and hundreds more were injured, many catastrophically. A giant manhunt for the brothers then occurred throughout the streets of Boston, resulting in further deaths, including that of Tamerlan Tsarnaev, who was shot by police and run over by a fleeing Dzhokhar. Dzhokhar was later caught hiding in a boat and was convicted of a slew of crimes, resulting in his imprisonment in ADX Florence. He is currently being held on the prison's death row, awaiting execution.
Boston Marathon bomber Dzhokhar Tsarnaev is suing the federal government for $250,000, claiming his treatment at the federal Supermax Correctional Complex Florence has been unlawful, unreasonable, and discriminatory.
Richard Reed. Infamously known as the Shoe Bomber, Reed is a British terrorist who, in December 2001, attempted to detonate explosives packed into the shoes he was wearing while on an American Airlines flight from Paris to Miami.
Today, and it changed the way we travel.
And it wasn't caught by the FBI or CIA, but instead by a South Florida flight attendant who blocked disaster.
This attempt was thwarted by the vigilant passengers and crew members on board.
And I said, "Excuse me, sir, what are you doing? What are you doing?" He ignored me. I asked him almost 3-4 times, and he ignored me. So what I did is I just grabbed him and pulled him.
Following his arrest, Reed was tried in the United States on charges of terrorism. He received life without the possibility of parole and is currently incarcerated with many other highly dangerous criminals inside ADX Florence. This facility is renowned for housing inmates requiring the highest level of security and is often where individuals guilty of the most serious offenses in the U.S. are placed.
The war hero is too big for me. I'm just a person who was given a task and I did it. I think that it's going to take more than a terrorist to just stop my life.
Robert Bowers.
As we think about those 11 people that were killed there in Pittsburgh in the synagogue.
On October 27, 2018, Robert Bowers stormed Pittsburgh's Tree of Life or Le Simcha congregation during Shabbat morning services. He opened fire inside the synagogue with 3 handguns and a semi-automatic rifle, injuring 6 and killing 11. Bowers was mainly motivated by far-right nationalist ideologies, including deep-seated anti-Semitism and a belief in the white replacement conspiracy theory, which posits that Jews are replacing white populations with non-white immigrants. Bowers was apprehended following a shootout and was convicted of 63 federal crimes. He is currently on death row at USP Terre Haute, awaiting execution, with Joe Biden having refused to commute his death sentence to life in prison.
Their jury decision was unanimous in voting for Robert Bowers to be sentenced to death. The aggravating factors that Bowers caused injury, harm, and loss not only to the 11 victims, but their family and friends as well.
Alec Murdaugh. This former lawyer from a prominent legal family in South Carolina became the center of a high-profile case that captured national attention.
The legacy and legal influence of the Murdaugh family in southeastern South Carolina dates back to the early 1900s.
In 2021, Murdaugh was convicted of the murder of his wife Maggie and their son Paul amid a web of financial fraud and misdeeds.
In the murder of your wife, Maggie Murdaugh, I sentence you for term of the rest of your natural life.
His trial unveiled a shocking narrative of deceit, financial desperation, and ultimately violence, leading to life without the possibility of parole. High-profile inmates like Murdaugh are often placed in maximum security to ensure their safety and prevent escape, although they may be transferred at a later date as circumstances dictate.
Would you ever do anything to harm Maggie?
I would never hurt Maggie.
Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. Often described as the mastermind behind the September 11, 2001 terrorist attacks, Mohammed remains detained at Guantanamo Bay's Camp Delta.
By his own words, he said he was responsible for the 9/11 operation from A to Z. That was in a 2007 confession.
His role in planning the attacks that led to the death of nearly 3,000 people and caused extensive destruction, including the collapse of the World Trade Center towers, places him at the center of one of the most significant terrorist plots in history.
Today he appeared with 4 others accused of training the hijackers, helping financially, and finding flight schools for them.
Arrested in 2003 in Pakistan, Mohammed has faced various charges related to terrorism and murder. His detention at Guantanamo, a high-security military facility, reflects the extraordinary nature of his alleged actions and the ongoing legal and ethical debates surrounding the treatment and rights of detainees in the context of global terrorism.
Of nearly 800 men and boys who've been detained at Guantanamo Bay, 39 remain. About a quarter were cleared for release as far back as 2010, but are still waiting to leave.
Dylan Roof.
The suspect in Wednesday night's deadly church massacre now in custody.
Roof was found guilty for the racially motivated massacre at the Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church in Charleston, South Carolina in 2015, where he murdered 9 African-American churchgoers. This heinous act was intended to incite racial tensions and violence. Roof, who embraced white supremacist ideologies, was found guilty on 33 federal charges, encompassing hate crimes. In 2017, he received a death sentence, marking a rare federal execution order aimed at denouncing racially motivated violence.
The first person in America to be given the death penalty in federal court for a hate crime.
Roof's incarceration on federal death row under maximum security conditions is not only a consequence of his acts, but also serves as a stark reminder of the deadly impact of hate and bigotry.
The U.S. Supreme Court rejected his bid to have his conviction overturned. He can still pursue other appeals, though.
John Floyd Thomas Jr. One of Los Angeles' most prolific serial killers, Thomas Jr. was arrested in 2009 and linked through DNA evidence to a series of brutal murders spanning several decades.
This is a scary story, people. LA's most prolific serial killer may have been caught.
His crimes mainly targeted elderly and vulnerable women in the Los Angeles area. His method of operation typically involved breaking into the homes of his victims, where he would then attack and murder them.
The murder victims in all cases under review were older white women, most of them lower-income widows living alone.
Thomas Jr. was convicted of multiple counts, and this shed light on a series of cold cases that had remained unsolved for years. Thomas Jr. was incarcerated in a maximum security prison, reflecting the threat he poses to public safety. Terry Nichols.
On April 19, 1995, a rental truck filled with homemade explosives detonated outside the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City.
This co-conspirator in the 1995 Oklahoma City bombing is serving multiple life sentences without the possibility of parole at ADX Florence, the aforementioned maximum security federal prison. The bombing, one of the deadliest terrorist attacks on U.S. soil prior to September 11, 2001, resulted in the deaths of 168 people and injured over 600. Nichols received federal and state charges for conspiracy to use a weapon of mass destruction and involuntary manslaughter.
In 2004, he was tried again on state charges in Oklahoma and convicted of 161 counts of first-degree murder.
His incarceration at ADX Florence, known for its stringent security measures, is indicative of the perceived ongoing threat he poses.
Even decades later, Americans still try to find rationale and reason, an explanation for acts of senseless terror, and hope that they will never happen again.
Dennis Rader. The BTK killer carried out a series of murders spanning from 1974 to 1991.
I am BTK. I'm the guy they're after.
His criminal activities caused widespread fear and garnered extensive media coverage, particularly in and around Wichita, Kansas.
I really feel pretty good. I feel like I'm kind of like a star right now.
No remorse, little emotion.
He just talks like he's coming home from a day at the office.
These crimes went unsolved for decades until a renewed investigation, aided by advances in forensic science, led to his arrest in 2005.
The police and a cast of dozens proudly announced his capture to the citizens of Wichita and the world.
He received 10 consecutive life terms and is incarcerated at the El Dorado Correctional Facility in Kansas, a maximum security prison. This facility is designed to house inmates who have committed serious felonies, ensuring high levels of security and surveillance. Danilo Cavalcanti. This Brazilian national was convicted of murder in the United States and subsequently undertook a daring escape from a Pennsylvania prison in September 2023.
His escape was not seen by the tower guard. That guard, by the way, is on leave and being investigated.
He was deemed guilty for the murder of his ex-girlfriend, which authorities described as an attempt to silence her from revealing his wanted status in Brazil for another murder. Cavalcante's escape prompted a massive manhunt involving multiple law enforcement agencies, highlighting the challenges of managing high-risk inmates.
Cavalcante's capture came after a night of nail-biting tension. He was first spotted around 1 a.m. by a drug enforcement plane using thermal night vision cameras.
His escape underscores the importance of maximum security measures in prisons to prevent prison breaks to ensure public safety, especially with inmates who have a history of violence and flight risk. Joaquin Guzman. El Chapo was once deemed the world's most powerful narco and is serving a life sentence plus 30 years in ADX Florence.
Like the rest here, segregated and on permanent lockdown 23 hours a day.
His leadership of the Sinaloa cartel involved the large-scale smuggling of illegal substances into the U.S., leading to widespread violence and corruption. Captured in 2016 after 2 dramatic escapes from Mexican prisons, Guzman's trial in 2019 resulted in convictions for money laundering and involvement in organized crime.
He tunneled out of the last Mexican prison where he was locked up and rode to freedom on an underground motorcycle.
His imprisonment under maximum security conditions is a testament to his perceived risk of escape and ongoing threat to public safety.
A jailbreak that no one has ever succeeded in pulling off. And dare we say, probably never will.
You would think not, but he's done it before, as you mentioned, just not in the United States.
Twice, that's true.
Do you think we'll ever see these people again?
I wish that Senator Kennedy was still alive.
For our next video, we're going to check in on some famous faces who did time and what they got up to after their release.
One good thing about me, Dave, is that I don't have a long memory for bad things.
Welcome to Watch Mojo. And today, we'll be checking in on the most notable celebrities who served prison time and seeing what they're up to now.
In 1999, Downey served a year in a California state prison.
Number 10, Felicity Huffman. Widely known for her role in ABC's Desperate Housewives, Felicity Huffman found herself in hot water when she was implicated in the 2019 college admissions scandal.
In court, Huffman told the judge, her voice shaking, "I'm deeply sorry. I've inflicted more damage than I could ever imagine." She said her daughter told her, "I don't know who you are anymore."
Huffman pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit mail fraud and honest services fraud after it was revealed that she had paid someone to manipulate her daughter's SAT scores.
In a statement released after sentencing, Huffman said, "I accept the court's decision today without reservations. There are no excuses or justifications for my actions. Period."
She was sentenced to 14 days in jail and released 2 days ahead of schedule. Also implicated was Full House actress Lori Loughlin, who received a 2-month prison sentence. Since her release, Huffman has largely retreated from the public eye, only appearing in an episode of The Good Doctor. She is set to reprise the role in the spin-off series The Good Lawyer.
We found out this had happened twice before.
Number 9, Wesley Snipes. They say nothing in life is certain except death and taxes. Hollywood star Wesley Snipes would come to learn this in 2008 when he was sentenced to 3 years in federal prison for willfully failing to file his tax returns.
Wesley Snipes has been ordered to spend spend 3 years in prison. That is 36 months for his failure to pay taxes for several years.
Prior to this scandal, Snipes had gained popularity for his collaborations with director Spike Lee and his iconic role as Blade.
And worse things out tonight than vampires.
Like what?
Like me.
The actor was released from prison in April 2013 and returned to the big screen in the ensemble action flick The Expendables 3.
So why'd you get locked away?
Tax evasion.
His comeback was solidified in 2019, earning critical acclaim as D'Urville Martin in Dolomite Is My Name, alongside Eddie Murphy. 2 years later, Snipes reunited with Murphy for the long-anticipated sequel, Coming to America.
Prince Akeem. Well, look at you.
Number 8, Mark Wahlberg. Today, he's a celebrated Oscar-nominated actor. But Mark Wahlberg had a troubled reputation during his teenage years, marked by racially motivated attacks.
I think it's pretty well known that you didn't grow up in a Norman Rockwell existence.
No, not
all right? Outside.
Not at all.
One notable incident occurred in April 1988 when he physically assaulted 2 Vietnamese American men in one day and hurled racial slurs at them. Wahlberg was arrested and later pleaded guilty to felony assault, serving 45 days of a 3-month jail sentence.
I was basically a follower instead of a leader, and I needed to change my ways.
However, he managed to turn his life around, steadily raising his profile in Hollywood and earning acclaim for his performances in films like The Departed and The Fighter.
I'm the one fighting, okay? Not you, and not you.
He has also appeared in blockbusters such as the Transformers franchise and the 2022 video game adaptation Uncharted.
Hey, come on! Trust me!
Number 7, Lauryn Hill. Lauded as one of the greatest rappers ever, Lauryn Hill found global fame with hip-hop trio The Fugees and later as a solo artist.
Let me break it down for you again. You know I only say it 'cause I'm truly genuine.
Her debut solo album, The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill, received widespread acclaim and the distinction of being the first hip-hop album to win the Album of the Year Grammy. Yet, Hill struggled with the pressures of fame, leading to a self-imposed exile. In 2012, she was charged with tax fraud for failing to pay about $1 million in taxes and sentenced to 3 months in prison.
I think the judge took into account the incredible person that Miss Hill is, the contribution she's made to society.
Since then, Hill has contributed to projects like 2015's What Happened, Miss Simone and the Queen and Slim movie soundtrack. In 2023, she embarked on the 25th anniversary tour of the Miseducation of Lauryn Hill. Number 6, Lindsay Lohan. Lindsay Lohan rose to prominence as a child star for her double role in 1998's The Parent Trap.
Don't you see it? See what? The resemblance between us. Resemblance? Between you and me?
However, her transition from teen idol to Hollywood leading lady was marked by significant legal troubles, mostly stemming from substance use disorder. Lohan was arrested twice in 2007 for driving under the influence and sentenced to 1 day in jail. 2 years later, while attending the Cannes Film Festival, she missed a court-mandated hearing, resulting in a 90-day sentence.
Defendant is ordered to spend 30 days in jail on the reckless driving case, 30 days in jail on the first DUI case consecutive, and 30 days in jail on the second DUI case consecutive. That's 90 days in jail.
Due to overcrowding, she only spent 14 days behind bars. These setbacks had a significant impact on her career. Nevertheless, Lohan made a comeback with the 2022 Netflix rom-com Falling for Christmas after signing a multi-picture deal with the streamer.
Oh, maybe we shouldn't do this. I mean, what if you're with somebody?
That would be unfortunate.
Number 5, Tim Allen. Back in 1978, Tim Allen was an up-and-coming stand-up comedian working in Detroit, Michigan. In October that year, he was arrested at the Kalamazoo Battle Creek International Airport and served over 2 years in prison for drug trafficking. Allen could have faced a possible life sentence if he didn't cut a deal with the prosecutors to rat out other drug dealers.
I learned literally how to live day by day, and I learned how to shut up.
Following his release, Allen continued with his comedy career and, a decade later, landed the role of Tim Taylor on the ABC sitcom Home Improvement.
This is the Bedford Series heavy-duty variable speed drill. Double reduction spur gearing, 1,400 RPM, 6.8 amps.
He gained additional recognition for voicing Buzz Lightyear in the Toy Story franchise and for his turn as store chain executive Mike Baxter in Last Man Standing.
Why do people feel like they need to go with the flow? I like to chart my own course.
Allen has remained sober for more than 2 decades. Number 4, Martha Stewart. This domestic diva and gardening guru built a media empire for herself with her lifestyle and homemaking tips.
In our constant pursuit of the perfect cookie, we are baking today a chocolate caramel surprise.
That empire came close to crumbling in 2004 when she was convicted of misleading investigators regarding a 2001 stock trade. This led to a 5-month sentence at the federal prison camp in Alderson, West Virginia.
Stewart will have to steel herself for a life of bunk beds, shared showers and toilets, a rigid 6 a.m. wake-up bell, a daily prison job, and no privacy.
But any speculation that Stewart's empire would crumble after her release fell flat on its face. Instead, the resilient entrepreneur made a triumphant comeback, launching more successful businesses and TV shows.
Uh-oh, Martha, what will you be making for us to drink today?
It's mulled wine, and it's very traditional at Christmas time.
In 2023, she made history as the oldest model ever featured on the cover of Sports Illustrated swimsuit issue.
I want other women, especially women, to feel that they could also be on the cover of Sports Illustrated issue.
Her current net worth, as reported by some publications, sits at around $400 million. Number 3, Robert Downey Jr. Anyone familiar with the life of Robert Downey Jr. knows that he defied great odds to still have a successful career in Hollywood today.
Isn't that 70% of it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say it's 70% maintenance of what can I do to do my part to stay out of the way.
Downey began acting as a child before establishing himself in the late 80s and early 90s. However, towards the end of the 90s, the actor faced severe legal troubles due to substance use disorder.
Robert Downey Jr. is opening up about his time in prison in the late 90s, saying it was the worst thing that happened to him.
He spent 6 months in jail in 1997 for missing a court-ordered drug test, followed by nearly a year behind bars in 1999 for the same offense. Fortunately, Downey turned his life around. In 2008, he became Iron Man in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, a role he played until 2019.
And I
He also won critical acclaim in 2023 for portraying Louis Strauss in Christopher Nolan's Oppenheimer.
Now the race is against the Soviets.
Not unless we start it.
Robert, they just fired the starting gun.
Number 2, O.J. Simpson. The 1995 murder trial of O.J. Simpson is well known globally. The former football star and actor was charged with the murders of his ex-wife Nicole Brown Simpson and her friend Ronald Goldman.
In the matter of the people of the state of California versus Orenthal James Simpson, case number BA097.
Simpson was famously acquitted of the crimes, although many believe he committed them. In 2007, Simpson faced a new legal challenge, this time for armed robbery. He was convicted of 12 criminal charges and sentenced to 33 years in prison.
Yes, Your Honor, I stand before you today, sorry. Somewhat confused.
Ultimately securing parole after nearly 9 years. Since his release, Simpson has led a relatively quiet life in Las Vegas, occasionally sharing his views on sports, politics, and even notable murder trials on social media.
Well, a whole lot of people are asking me what I think about this Alex Murdaugh trial. I don't know why they think I'm an expert on it, but...
He was taken off parole in 2021 and is now a free man. Number 1, Bill Cosby. Once celebrated as America's dad, Bill Cosby fell drastically from grace after dozens of women accused him of sexual assault, with some cases dating back to the 1960s.
And as he's going out the door, I said, how are we going? How are we getting out of here? And how are we getting home? And he just pointed, he didn't even look at me. He pointed to the desk and he said, call a cab.
In 2015, Cosby was indicted on charges of aggravated indecent assault for an incident that occurred in 2004. After 2 criminal trials, he was found guilty and sentenced to 3 to 10 years in prison.
Our team inside the courtroom reporting that there was no reaction from Bill Cosby. He looked straight ahead as this verdict was delivered, though there were audible gasps in the courtroom.
However, in 2021, his conviction was overturned on a legal technicality, and Cosby was set free.
The judges pointing to a vast violation of Cosby's due process rights in the decision.
Despite this, he has faced civil lawsuits from his accusers, one resulting in a $500,000 payout. Cosby is now reportedly working on a docuseries about his life, a memoir, and a comeback comedy tour, although the latter has been put on hold. What other celebrities with troubled pasts did we miss?
It is, of course, a media circus. Paris Hilton exiting now after serving 23 days behind bars.
As we're about to see, for some crime lords, a prison sentence isn't the end. It's just a change of venue.
Despite his business acumen, Guzman is not always successful at staying ahead of the law.
Welcome to WatchMojo, and today we're looking at crime syndicate leaders who were confirmed to be active in their organizations even while behind bars.
Esos crímenes dentro de la catedral ya eran inconcebibles.
Salvatore Riina, the Sicilian Mafia. In 1986, the Maxi trial in Palermo handed Salvatore Toto Riina a life sentence in absentia.
Salvatore Toto Riina, one of the most violent and feared godfathers in the history of the Sicilian Mafia. The farmer's son from the town of Corleone took control of the Cosa Nostra in the 1970s and ruled with an iron fist for almost 2 decades.
It would be nearly 7 more years before the Sicilian Mafia chief was captured, but this would not be the end of his notoriously cruel rampage. The detained Riina and other bosses ordered a series of terrorist attacks to assassinate or intimidate witnesses.
Sostiene che la mafia si uccide, fa guerra fra di loro, quindi se io non faccio parte di un clan, non temo, non rischio nulla, non devo temere nulla dalla mafia. In realtà a quel punto Toto Riina cambia la strategia, attacca direttamente lo Stato ed è lì che anche la gente comune si accorge, si rende conto di essere in pericolo veramente.
He also ordered more strategic hits, including the kidnapping and eventual murder of an informant's 12-year-old son. Riina's criminal career finally came to an end when he was moved to solitary confinement for the remainder of his life. Until then, the brutality that could only be contained by extreme measures earned him the nickname La Belva, the Beast.
Caught on wiretap in early 2017, Riina made clear his reflections on a life of crime, saying he regretted nothing.
Rayful Edmond, Independent. Drug kingpin Rayful Edmond III was key to the expansion of the crack epidemic into Washington, D.C.
When crack was the hustle here in the nation's capital back in the 1980s, nobody, absolutely nobody, worked harder than Rayful Edmond III.
The resulting violence earned the city the reputation as the murder capital of the U.S. Edmond's conviction in 1990 merely provided business opportunities. He collaborated with fellow high-profile inmates at the Lewisburg Federal Penitentiary to continue trafficking. When he was caught in '96, 30 years were added to his life sentence.
When it was over, the punishment for the convicted 24-year-old Rayful Edmond included 2 life sentences with no chance of parole.
Though the oversight and this gesture were scandalous, Edmond became a government informant to protect his mother. After multiple arrests and years in witness protection, he died shortly after being released in 2024. Despite some good coming out of Edmond's second downfall, there's no accounting for the damage he caused even locked away.
Rayful Edmond was for a long time a government informant, and his information helped to put other drug dealers here in D.C. behind bars. And yet, guys, when he left prison, he did not do so under an assumed name or in the witness protection program.
Lawrence Bishnoi, Bishnoi Gang. Much of the story of the Bishnoi Gang takes place behind bars. The namesake was a petty criminal who cultivated connections in jail in the early 2010s. By the time he was finally sent to prison in 2014, Lawrence Bishnoi had built an empire well beyond Punjab. He then continued to lead some 700 associates in international smuggling, murder, and political corruption. He became something of a celebrity in 2018 when he made a press statement threatening actor Salman Khan outside of a courthouse. Continued operations even after multiple transfers have not curbed that hubris. Once an ambitious student from an affluent family, Bishnoi is an alarming testament to what a great mind is capable of in prison. Vincent the Chin Gigante, the Genovese crime family. This low-level enforcer was in and out of jail before his 1959 conviction only strengthened bonds with cellmate Vito Genovese, the mentor he aided in his takeover of the Luciano family 2 years prior.
Convicted mobsters are expected to do their time and remain silent. If Gigante served his time and kept his mouth shut, he would be rewarded after his release. It was up to Gigante to figure out how to avoid future arrests.
Vincent the Chin Gigante went on to become a powerful New York boss who evaded trial with public displays of mental unfitness.
He's said to be one of the most powerful mobsters in America. His lawyers say he's insane, but tonight it appears Gigante will finally be brought to justice.
After the ruse fell apart in 1997, he continued to run the Genovese crime family from prison. Andrew Gigante acted as his father's attaché until they were both indicted on racketeering and obstruction charges in 2002. The Chin's shocking guilty plea formally put an end to a criminal career that spanned decades and sometimes thrived in prison.
Finally admitting in court that he had been faking insanity the entire time.
Carmine Persico, the Colombo crime family. Nicknamed Immortal, Carmine Persico was practically unstoppable as boss of the Colombo crime family.
Instead of creating a dynasty, he unleashed a debacle. He virtually destroyed the family.
He was believed to still be in charge after he began his tenure in prison in 1973, before receiving a permanent sentence in '86. Persico collaborated with John DeRoss then, and after the latter's release in the wake of the Third Colombo War. What followed was years of power struggles and restructuring under Persico's supervision.
The verdicts ensured that Carmine Persico would never again be a free man. But being behind bars didn't mean giving up control of the family.
A government informant even testified that he took contracts out on the FBI agents and prosecutors responsible for his imprisonment. Though the open secret of his influence reportedly declined through the years, Persico was the official boss of the Colombo family from 1973 to his death in 2019.
That's Carmine's MO. Carmine never relinquished control, whether he was in prison, whether he was on the lam, or in the courtroom representing himself. It was all Carmine's way.
Raffaele Cutolo, the NCO. Raffaele Cutolo's run with Neapolitan street gangs ended when he was incarcerated for murder in 1963. That was really just the beginning of his criminal career. The young rogue's charisma and business instincts cultivated a huge following among inmates. As they carried Cutolo's influence beyond prison, the Nuova Camorra Organizzata became one of the most sophisticated and powerful syndicates in Italy. But after the organization was devastated by gang wars, Cutolo was effectively removed from his network after being transferred in '93. By then, his defiance of the penal system was so notorious that it inspired the fictional novel and film The Professor, titled after Cutolo's nickname. The true story is a chilling enough portrait of a violent mastermind with nothing to lose. Anthony Gaspipe Casso, the Lucchese crime family. Even for New York organized crime, Lucchese underboss Anthony Gaspipe Casso was considered sadistic.
Gaspipe Casso had a reputation in organized crime of being crazy.
I wanted to beat him with the gun after it was empty.
And to be considered crazy in organized crime is a major achievement.
That came back to haunt him after his arrest in 1993. While detained at the Metropolitan Correctional Center, Casso arranged escape plans and hits. His orders became so reckless that the family ultimately severed ties. Casso thus became an informant for the FBI to protect himself at many colleagues' expense.
He was a persona non grata. Nobody in the family would lift a finger to help him. What was his recourse? One thing, come a rat.
However, the plea deal was nullified by his lack of honesty and cooperation with authorities, as well as continued criminal activity. Casso was sentenced to 455 years in prison in '98, having burned all his connections by trying to keep them inside. He died in 2020 after failing to secure compassionate release.
The key to the kingdom is to tell the truth. And if you decide to lie, then all bets are off.
Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, the Sinaloa cartel. The legend of Joaquin Guzman's power was cemented by his stints in prison.
To many in Sinaloa, El Chapo is not just a drug trafficker. He's a hero. They see him as a modern-day Robin Hood.
His leadership of the Sinaloa cartel made him one of the world's most powerful criminals before he was sent to prison in Mexico in 1993. There, El Chapo delegated his organization to greater power and enjoyed a lavish lifestyle by bribing guards. They eventually let him walk out of prison in 2001.
How he escaped remains a little murky. The official version, and the one recounted by most journalists, is that he was rolled out in a laundry cart by a lower-ranking prison official.
He was arrested again 13 years later, detained under strict security, and escaped again through a tunnel. His 2016 arrest and subsequent extradition to U.S. federal custody finally put an end to his influence. El Chapo's story being unlike any in organized crime, it took a lot to truly lock him away.
Nobody's ever broken out of the Supermax prison here in Colorado since opening in 1994, known as the Alcatraz of the Rockies. This airtight penitentiary has housed the worst of the worst. including billionaire cartel kingpin Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, like the rest here, segregated and on permanent lockdown 23 hours a day.
Charles Lucky Luciano, the Luciano crime family. In 1936, the boss of the Luciano family seemingly ran out of luck when he was sentenced to up to 5 decades in prison.
Under Luciano, the mafia grew to be bigger than General Motors. And by the time he'd finished, the mob was raking in $40 billion a year.
In fact, Charles Lucky Luciano's influence went a long way over the next decade. He made orders through acting bosses and acquired luxurious amenities, including a personal chef.
Although Luciano remained the boss, Frank Costello, a highly regarded and well-known figure in New York's underworld, took over the day-to-day running of his empire. And Costello continued to bring in millions of dollars and increase the family's fortunes, while his boss planned his next move.
It was only after a failed appeal 2 years later that he stepped down from his position. However, with World War II raging, the Navy tapped Luciano and his organization to help secure the New York waterfront and provide contacts in Sicily. In exchange, Luciano received deportation to and relative freedom in Italy in '46.
Luciano had served just 10 years of his 50-year sentence when he left American shores on February the 10th, 1946. Bound for Sicily.
Even in apparent defeat, the father of the modern mafia was an effective negotiator. Pablo Escobar, the Medellin cartel. Pablo Escobar's influence was such that he could control his own downfall in 1991.
Recuerdo doloroso para la historia colombiana, jefe del cartel de Medellín, uno de los carteles más poderosos que ha tenido no solamente el país y el mundo.
De hecho, él y sus socios consiguieron lo que otras organizaciones delincuenciales jamás han podido hacer.
He negotiated his surrender to the Colombian government on the condition that he would only serve 5 years in a prison he himself designed. Escobar even handpicked his guards at La Catedral, nicknamed Hotel Escobar for its luxuries.
En ese momento estábamos hablando de una guerra sin cuartel en contra de la sociedad colombiana y una oferta de negociación que estaba sujeta a que se le dieran algunos prerequisitos para que el enemigo número uno en ese momento terminara sometido a la justicia.
The cozy deal required the Medellin cartel leader to cease all criminal activities. But of course, it was business as usual under the security of government corruption. Escobar's official incarceration was really just to prevent extradition to the US and protect him from enemies. Following media reports of torture and murder at La Catedral, Escobar escaped to avoid transfer to a legitimate prison and died in a police pursuit in '93.
Escobar es el perfecto ícono del mal, es tan buen narco que es una máquina de hacer dinero después de muerto.
Who are some other criminals whose influence couldn't be locked up with them?
Prison may be designed for punishment, but for many, it became a death sentence. Here now are 50 infamous criminals who were murdered in prison.
Jeffrey Dahmer met his death this morning while working as a janitor.
Welcome to WatchMojo, and today we're looking at 50 criminals who met violent ends while serving time in prison.
The beating was so savage, 89-year-old Bulger was unrecognizable when his body was found.
Billy Wright.
One of the most sinister figures to emerge from 30 years of violence.
Going by the wonderful nickname King Rat, Billy Wright was a prominent Northern Irish loyalist and leader of the Loyalist Volunteer Force. He was heavily involved in violent paramilitary activity during the Troubles and staunchly opposed the peace process, often killing innocent Catholic civilians. Wright was eventually arrested for making death threats and imprisoned in the high-security Maze prison in 1997. Despite warnings about threats to his life, he was housed near inmates belonging to LVF's rivals, the Irish National Liberation Army. On December 27, 1997, INLA members smuggled weapons into the prison and assassinated Wright inside a van, shooting him multiple times at close range. The hit raised serious concerns about security failures at the facility, with many suspecting collusion by prison authorities.
There were many more dark days to come for the people of Northern Ireland.
Felix Mitchell.
At the time is when Felix Mitchell was the biggest heroin drug kingpin at the time.
Known as Felix the Cat, Felix Mitchell was a notorious Oakland drug lord who led a heroin empire called the 69 Mob. At its peak, his enormous operation was generating up to $400,000 a month. But in 1985, Mitchell was convicted on charges of running a criminal enterprise and was sentenced to life in prison. On August 21, 1986, just 1 year into his lengthy sentence, Mitchell was fatally stabbed by another inmate at Leavenworth Federal Penitentiary. The killer's motive remains unclear, though some reports suggest it was over a $10 drug debt. Mitchell's lavish and controversial funeral in Oakland drew thousands of onlookers, featuring the likes of a horse-drawn carriage and a dozen Rolls-Royce limousines.
Just when the East Bay thought one of its most notorious hoods was gone forever, he came back to star in a funeral production fit for a king.
Rufus McCain.
December 3rd, 1940. The brutal slaying of inmate Rufus McCain occurs in a prison tailor shop.
When you think of prisoners escaping from Alcatraz, you probably think of Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers, who disappeared into the night on June 11, 1962, and were never seen again. But over 20 years earlier, another attempt was made by Rufus McCain and 4 others. On the night of January 13, 1939, the 5 men attempted to escape Alcatraz, but unlike Morris and the Anglins, they were all caught before making it to the water. McCain and another inmate, Henry Young, were sentenced to 22 months in solitary for the attempt. They were eventually released back into the prison population, but Young, likely suffering the brutal psychological effects of isolation, stabbed McCain to death with a sharpened wooden spoon.
And to say that he had descended into pure animality and that he could no longer distinguish between right and wrong was an easy thing to say.
Lorenzo Chierici. A prominent Italian fascist, Lorenzo Chierici served as chief of police under Benito Mussolini in 1943. After Mussolini's ousting on July 25th, Chierici was removed from his post, but later reinstated by Prime Minister Pietro Badoglio as a lieutenant colonel in the Royal Italian Army. Following the Armistice of Castibile, which ended fighting between Italy and the Allies, Chierici was arrested by the Nazis and handed over to the Italian Social Republic. Branded a traitor, Chierici was thrown in prison and was later murdered inside his own cell. These specific events remain unclear, and the motives are still questioned, although most believe that he was silenced in order to prevent his testimony at the upcoming Verona trial. Angelo La Barbera. Even mob bosses aren't immune to prison retaliations. Angelo La Barbera was a prominent Sicilian mafioso who, alongside his brother Salvatore, led the Palermo Centro family, playing a key role in the first mafia war of the early 60s. Convicted of 7 murders, La Barbera received a 22-year sentence in the trial of the 114, which was one of the first large-scale efforts by the Italian state to confront the Sicilian mafia. In 1975, he was imprisoned in Perugia, where on October 28th, he was fatally stabbed by 3 fellow inmates. Reports suggest the murder was ordered by the Greco family, possibly to prevent him from exposing politicians with ties to the mafia.
I'm a retired investor living on a pension.
Kurt Gustav Wilkins. This German anarchist became known for assassinating Argentine military officer Colonel Hector Varela in 1923. Just a few years earlier, Varela had killed hundreds during a brutal suppression of striking laborers in Patagonia, and Wilkins wanted revenge. He surrendered immediately after the assassination and was imprisoned in Buenos Aires, and his presence drew attention owing to his strong political stance. On June 15, 1923, Wilkins was murdered by Jorge Ernesto Perez Millan, a right-wing paramilitary officer who was smuggled into the prison. Millan's killing of Wilkins was also motivated by revenge, fueling the cycle of political violence that was prevalent in Argentina at the time. Dong Guisen.
我以前没得选择，现在我想做一个好人。
This Taiwanese gangster was a member of the United Bamboo Gang, which is one of the country's most powerful triads. Dong gained international notoriety for his involvement in the 1984 assassination of Henry Liu, a prominent journalist critical of the Chinese Nationalist Party, which rules the Republic of China in Taiwan. After years on the run, Dong was eventually captured, extradited to the United States, and sentenced to life in prison. He served his time in Pennsylvania's Lewisburg Federal Penitentiary, and on February 21, 1991, Dong was stabbed in a prison brawl over cigarettes. He was grievously injured and stayed alive for over a month, but ultimately died from his injuries on April 3rd. John Mansfield. Back in 2006, British man John Mansfield broke into the home of his 63-year-old neighbor Anne Alfonso and attacked her with a knife. Alfonso died after receiving dozens of stab wounds, and police say that Mansfield had hoped to rob her of her spare change. Mansfield was sent to HMP Whitemore, where he was detained in the Close Supervision Center owing to his history of violence with other inmates. According to prison officials, those held in CSC are often considered the worst of the worst and are prone to inflicting violence on other inmates. Indeed, on April 13, 2025, Mansfield died from horrific head injuries that were sustained in an attack. He was 63 years old, the same age as Anne Alfonso. Ivan Colonna.
Draped with a Corsican flag are the remains of Ivan Colonna, the village shepherd who defied the French state.
A Corsican nationalist, Ivan Colonna was convicted for the assassination of Claude Erignac, a French prefect of Corsica who was killed in an act of resistance against French rule. Arrested in 2003 after years on the run, Colonna consistently denied involvement, but was ultimately sentenced to life in prison. On March 2, 2022, Colonna was violently attacked by fellow inmate and radicalized Islamist Franck Elong Abbé. The assault was reportedly motivated by religious grievances, with Abbé claiming that Colonna had, quote, disrespected Muhammad. Colonna was in a coma for 3 weeks, but he never recovered and died on March 21st. His death sparked outrage and protests in Corsica, further reigniting tensions between the French government and Corsican nationalists.
Ivan Colonna has become, since his death, a symbol of Corsican nationalism.
Rodolfo Cadena. Nicknamed Cheyenne, Rodolfo Cadena was a prominent leader of the prison gang Mexican Mafia, or La M.A. Born in San Antonio and raised in California, Cadena became involved in gang activity at an early age, leading to his incarceration at age 16 for murder. While imprisoned, he rose through La M.A.'s ranks, eventually seeking to unify various gangs, including the Nuestra Familia, in order to reduce violence. However, this initiative was opposed by La M.A. leaders, who ordered hits on rival gang members, undermining Cadena's peace efforts and even marking him for death. On December 17, 1972, Cadena was ambushed by NF members, stabbed approximately 50 times, thrown from the third-story floor, and stabbed another dozen times on the ground.
You coming out, is there? Yeah.
Larry Davis.
A correctional officer that was overlooking the yard saw a bunch of inmates kind of congregating around an argument between, I guess, you and Larry Davis.
This Bronx native gained notoriety in 1986 after engaging in a huge shootout with the NYPD, during which 6 officers were shot and wounded. Davis evaded capture for over 2 weeks before surrendering. Though acquitted of attempted murder, Davis was later convicted in 1991 for the murder of suspected drug dealer Raymond Vizcaino and sentenced to 25 years to life. On February 20, 2008, while incarcerated at New York's Shawangunk Correctional Facility, Davis was fatally stabbed multiple times by fellow Crip inmate Luis Rosado. Davis lost an incredible amount of blood in the attack, and the prison nurse called for emergency transport after being unable to treat him. He was already dead by the time he arrived at St. Luke's Hospital.
I ended up stabbing him, and if he was the actual target, I would have kept stabbing him, because I was already caught.
Jesse Anderson. Everyone remembers or knows about Jeffrey Dahmer being murdered in prison, but what some people forget is that there was another victim that day. He was Jesse Anderson, an inmate serving life in prison after murdering his wife and blaming the attack on 2 black men. Anderson was serving time alongside Dahmer in Wisconsin's Columbia Correctional Institution, and they were both scheduled to clean the prison gym with another inmate, Christopher Scarver. Anderson was severely beaten by Scarver while out on detail, and he died 2 days later from his injuries. Like Dahmer, it's believed that Anderson was killed for targeting black men in his crime. Polly Bartlett.
I've been wishing I was dead for a long time.
While the story is locally regarded as a fanciful folktale, Polly Bartlett is said to be the first serial killer in the history of Wyoming. Bartlett reportedly owned a beautiful lodge, which would house rich travelers heading west in the mid-19th century. She would provide them with a warm meal and whiskey, but would poison the meal, steal their belongings, and bury the travelers on her property. Investigators later found a total of 22 bodies buried around the lodge. Bartlett was later arrested for the murders and put in a jail cell to await trial. But before it could even begin, Bartlett was shot through the cell window by a German immigrant named Otto Kalkhorst.
You still want that kiss?
Earl Krugel. This violent activist was an acting member of the Jewish Defense League, a far-right organization that purports to physically resist anti-Semitism. In November 2001, Krugel was arrested after receiving a large shipment of gunpowder. When questioned, Krugel admitted that he was making an explosive device in order to bomb both the King Fahd Mosque in Culver City and the office of Arab-American Congressman Darrell Issa. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison, serving his time in Phoenix's Federal Correctional Institution. On November 4, 2005, Krugel was using an exercise machine when a neo-Nazi named David Jennings approached him from behind and bludgeoned him to death with a block of concrete. Munna Bajrangi. Born Prem Prakash Singh, Munna Bajrangi was a notorious Indian gangster and politician from Uttar Pradesh. Active primarily in the 1990s, Bajrangi was linked to multiple criminal activities, including extortion and various murders, serving as a professional contract killer. Bajrangi later gained notoriety after allegedly killing a member of the Legislative Assembly, Krishnanand Rai, in 2005. On July 9, 2018, just a day after being transferred to Bagput jail for a court hearing, Bajrangi was shot dead inside the prison. His assassin was fellow gangster and prisoner Sunil Ratti. When asked why he had murdered Bajrangi, Ratti said that he had called him chubby. Richard Huckle.
In Huckle's hometown, news of his crimes have shocked his friends and acquaintances.
One of Britain's most notorious criminals was Richard Huckle, a young man who spent a lot of time in Malaysia. While there, Huckle spent his days doing freelance photography, studying IT, and working as a Christian missionary. But it was also during this time that Huckle committed dozens of horrible sexual offenses. Huckle was eventually arrested by the National Crime Agency and convicted of 71 counts of sexual assault, resulting in life in prison. On October 13, 2019, Huckle was killed in his cell by a fellow inmate named Paul Fitzgerald. This attack shocked the prosecution that was trying Fitzgerald for the murder, who called it a, quote, sadistic and, quote, prolonged attack. Fitzgerald was given an extra 34 years for killing Huckle.
None of his family will speak about him. None of us ever want to see Richard again.
Nikolai Radkevich, a Russian serial killer from the early 20th century. Nikolai Radkevich began his spree after being expelled by the Cadet Corps.
This was not a good time to be disgraced and out of work in Russia. The economic conditions in the country were not good.
Wanting to purge the world of what he considered depraved and immoral women, Radkevich killed 3 sex workers between June and September of 1909. He was finally apprehended on September 17th, immediately after killing his third and final victim in a hotel.
He called for the doorman to stop him, and along with other staff, the doorman managed to wrestle Nikolai Radkevich to the ground.
He was sentenced to 8 years in the katorga, a Russian form of punishment in which prisoners were sent off to Siberia to perform forced labor. Radkevich spent 4 years in these brutal conditions before he was killed by fellow inmates. John Jairo Moreno Torres. Known as Johnny the Leper from a childhood injury, Colombian killer John Jairo Moreno Torres caused trouble from a young age. He dropped out of school at 13 and joined the most feared gang in Bogota, selling drugs and committing a number of violent crimes. He officially killed 4 people throughout his time as the gang's leader, but it's believed that he may have murdered up to 20. He also committed a number of assaults before he was apprehended in February 1998, still just a teenager. He was sent to Bogota's La Modelo prison and was violently executed by other prisoners, who shot Torres 12 times with a smuggled firearm. Colin Hatch. Called both highly dangerous and a menace to the public, Colin Hatch was sentenced to life back in 1994 for committing an unspeakable crime.
When he was jailed in 1994, Colin Hatch was told he was so dangerous it would never be safe to release him and he would die in prison.
Hatch had a history of similar behavior and was sent to a maximum facility in Yorkshire called HM Prison Full Sutton. He remained in the prison for almost 2 decades, but his life was cut short in February of 2011. In what prison officials called, quote, an accident, Hatch was ambushed by another inmate named Damien Folks, who had a history of attacking prisoners involved with a certain type of crime.
Humberside police are now questioning 35-year-old fellow prisoner Damien Folks in connection with his death.
Ian Huntley, another prominent victim of Folks, survived his attack. Hatch was not so lucky, and he died from the injuries that Folks had caused. Enriqueta Martí. Known by creepy names like the Vampire of Barcelona, Enriqueta Martí was a Spanish serial killer who is thought to have murdered 12 victims in the early 1900s.
And it was alleged that Enriqueta was involved in taking these children.
Unfortunately, the records of these crimes are quite scarce, owing to both the time period and the economic situation of her victims, leading some to question Martí's guilt. Adding to the general confusion is the lack of a trial. Martí was arrested and held in the Reina Amalia jail but was killed before her trial could begin. The official story is that Martí was attacked by her fellow inmates and publicly hanged on the jail's patio.
She was buried in a mass grave on the outskirts of Barcelona and took most of the names of the victims and her clients with her.
Billy Shamirmir. Throughout the late 2010s, Texas man Billy Shamirmir would pose as a maintenance man and break into the homes of elderly women. He would then attack the women while they were alone and smother them with a pillow.
At a press conference yesterday, family members of the victims Shamirmir was charged with killing gathered to truly share their reactions.
While Shamirmir was officially convicted of just 2 deaths, police believe he's responsible for dozens of murders around the greater Dallas area. He was convicted of the deaths of Luthi Harris and Mary Brooks, resulting in 2 life sentences in the H.H. Cofield unit of Texas. While inside, Shamirmir made some inappropriate comments about the family of a cellmate and was subsequently beaten to death, and possibly even stabbed with a pen.
This morning, there's a lot of comments, and I've been reading through them all morning long, and let's just be honest, there's none that are really appropriate to air on television this morning. Let's just say he won't be missed.
Robert Liberty. In 1966, Robert Liberty attempted to take his own life but failed and was placed in the Orange County Medical Center. There, he met 31-year-old Marcella Landis, and the two entered a relationship. Soon after, Liberty strangled Landis to death with a stocking. He was declared legally insane and placed in a state hospital until 1969, when he was deemed fit to re-enter society. He soon killed 2 more people, his roommate Thomas Astorina and Robert Irian, a nurse who worked at the state hospital. Liberty was arrested again following an FBI manhunt and once again pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity. But before his trial could take place, Liberty was strangled and killed by a cellmate named Timothy Dudley. Robert Simon. Known as Mudman by his peers, Robert Simon was a member of the Philadelphia-based Warlocks Motorcycle Club, an outlaw club with a reputation for violence.
Fire a knife. Answer him.
Even by their standards, Simon was known as a dangerous renegade and was supposedly made the club's enforcer owing to his history of reckless violence. Aside from committing armed robbery and arson, Simon is also known to have killed 2 people, his teenage girlfriend Beth Smith Duesenberg and a New Jersey police officer named Hipólito Gonzalez, who had pulled Simon over during a routine traffic stop.
Immediately following the shooting, both Mudman and Staples tried fleeing the scene, but were soon pursued by nearby police officers who had heard the 2 gunshots on Sergeant Gonzalez's radio request for backup.
The killing of Gonzalez sent Simon to New Jersey State Prison, where he was beaten to death by cellmate Ambrose Harris while awaiting execution. Leslie Bailey. Some crimes are so horrible that the people who commit them have to be segregated in prison.
Although, of course, we all knew that these things went on and they existed, but the degree and the amount involved surprised us all.
That was the case with English serial killer Leslie Bailey, who was a Rule 43 inmate at Whitemore Prison. This meant that Bailey had to be separated from the rest of the prison population, as officials feared that he would be attacked. The rule stems from Bailey's past, as he was linked to various unspeakable crimes, including the deaths of 3 individuals.
But I could honestly say, I don't really know if I'd ever want to hear another confession again if it was in those circumstances.
Bailey was known to roam with a gang of criminals, and police believe that they were guilty of even more crimes and deaths. Regardless, justice came for Bailey, despite his position in prison. In October of 1993, Bailey was found strangled to death in his cell. Edwin Caprat. With most of his victims being elderly women, Florida man Edwin Caprat earned the moniker the Granny Killer.
Edwin, who was nicknamed Mike by family members, was said to be intelligent and loved reading books, but he was also known to be a very violent and easily angered bully who would go after those smaller and weaker than himself.
Caprat's first victim was a 27-year-old man named Lee Bugay, who had been beaten over the head with a pipe. He then killed a number of elderly individuals throughout 1993, often committing arson in the process and staging their deaths as accidents. An anonymous individual phoned the police and told them to look into Caprat, who had previously been jailed for the death of Bugay. His fingerprints were found at one of the crime scenes, and Caprat was arrested and sentenced to death.
Throughout both trials, Edwin Caprat was uninterested in the proceedings and was supposedly reading a book the entire time.
But on April 19, 1995, Caprat got into a fight with fellow inmates Mario Lara and Rigoberto Sanchez Velasco and was fatally stabbed. Jacques Thériault. Considered one of the most notorious criminals in Canadian history, Jacques Thériault was a cult leader who founded the Doomsday Cult and Hill Kids in the 1970s. Claiming to be a prophet, Thériault went by the name Moïse and was known to manipulate his followers, committing horrific acts including physical abuse and murder. The cult was disbanded in 1989 when Thériault was arrested for assault, and he was later convicted for the murder of follower Solange Boilard. While serving his time in Dorchester Penitentiary, Thériault was stabbed in the neck by his cellmate, Matthew MacDonald. MacDonald then reportedly walked to the officer's station and handed them the shiv, saying, quote, "Here's the knife. I've sliced him up." Carl Williams. A prominent drug trafficker, Carl Williams was a powerful figure in the Australian underworld.
He got bigger and bigger, and just greedier, as they tend to do.
He played a large role in the Melbourne gangland killings that occurred between 1998 and 2010, with officials believing that he's responsible for at least 10 of the 36 contract killings. He was eventually put away on 4 counts of murder, having personally ordered their deaths.
They appeared to have little regard for the safety of innocent people around them.
The victims were Jason and Louis Moran of the prominent Moran family, criminal associate Mark Malia, and Michael Marshall, who was shot and killed in front of his young son. Williams was sent to HM Prison Barwon, where fellow inmate Matthew Charles Johnson bludgeoned him to death with the handle of an exercise bike. Roger Kibbe. Dubbed the I-5 Strangler, Roger Kibbe was responsible for the assault and deaths of at least 8 women. His killing spree mostly occurred around Sacramento, California between 1977 and 1987, and he would hunt for his victims along the interstate highway, hence the nickname. He was eventually arrested in 1988 and received an initial prison sentence of 25 years to life.
For each victim, Kibbe responded in a hoarse, raspy voice saying guilty, guilty 6 times.
In the following years, more life sentences were added to this as further evidence of his other murders was discovered. On February 28, 2021, while at the Mule Creek State Prison in California, the I-5 Strangler was strangled to death by his cellmate, Jason Boudreau, who reportedly did it in retribution for his crimes.
Shock from victims' families tonight, guys. Those who were directly impacted by Roger Kibbe and his serial slayings. But some of these families tonight are saying his death comes 35 years too late.
Gerard John Schaefer.
I never thought that I would be that close to someone who was capable of doing those things.
Gerard John Schaefer was working as a sheriff's deputy in Florida when he abducted 2 young female hitchhikers and tied them up in a remote forest. The teenagers were able to escape after he was called away on police duty. After he claimed he only wanted to show them the risks of hitchhiking, he was apprehended and charged with false imprisonment and aggravated assault. While out on bail, Schaefer abducted and killed 2 other girls and was re-arrested after their decomposed bodies were found in the woods. Schaefer was sentenced to serve 2 concurrent life terms at the Florida State Prison, where in 1995, he was killed by another inmate, Vincent Rivera. Rivera was handed an additional 53 years for the murder.
When I found out that Schaefer had been killed, it was like a horrible stink had just drifted out the window, and for the first time in years, I could breathe fresh air.
Sidonio Teixeira. In 2008, Sidonio Teixeira was sentenced to life imprisonment for taking the life of his young daughter and also attempting to murder his son. While serving his sentence at the Long Lartin Top Security Prison in Worcestershire, England, Teixeira was attacked by another inmate while working at the prison workshop. The culprit, Victor Castigador, reportedly put a stone in a sock, which he used to beat Teixeira, who later succumbed to his injuries. Castigador, who claimed to have been purging the world of evil, was found guilty in 1990 of the murders of 2 security guards and was serving a life sentence already. He was subsequently issued a whole life order by the Birmingham Crown Court for killing Teixeira. Donald Leroy Evans.
2 days ago, a 12-member jury sentenced Donald Leroy Evans to death by lethal injection.
Although he was only found guilty of 2 murders, Donald Leroy Evans admitted responsibility in the killings of over 70 people.
He even led the FBI on a 2-day search for bodies in the Arizona desert, but they found nothing.
If true, this would make him one of the most prolific serial killers in U.S. history. On August 1st, 1991, Evans took the life of his last victim, Beatrice Louise Routh in Mississippi. He was arrested 4 days later and eventually sentenced to death. His crimes also resulted in convictions at the federal level and in the state of Florida. In 1999, while sitting on death row, a fellow inmate named Jimmy Mack decided to bring Evans's execution date a little closer. The two were reportedly in the prison shower when Mack stabbed Evans to his death. Nikolai Fifilov. Over the span of 6 years, Nikolai Fifilov rained terror on the town of Sverdlovsk in the then Soviet Union. In all, he had a victim count of 7, all of whom were female. Fifilov had served in the Soviet army, and it's believed that the motivation for his crimes came from being rejected by a woman he loved. He was arrested in 1988 after being caught by a senior Soviet official trying to dispose of his last victim's body. Fifilov was in jail awaiting trial when he met his demise at the hands of his cellmate on August 30th, 1988. Conspiracies soon arose that his murder was arranged in order to prevent a potentially sensationalized trial. Those claims, however, have never been confirmed. LaRon Williams. In October 1977, LaRon Williams claimed the life of a sex worker in Nashville, Tennessee. Before his trial, he bargained a plea deal that came with a sentence of 10 years imprisonment. He was still serving his time in 1981 when he escaped from the Memphis Correctional Center. While on the run, Williams killed an additional 2 people, a police officer who tried to arrest him and a Catholic priest. He was recaptured soon after and sent back to prison, this time with 2 death sentences. On July 8, 1985, Williams was descended upon by a group of other inmates, reportedly for being on the prison phone for too long. He was left severely injured and ultimately died at a nearby hospital. Daniel Camargo Barbosa. Born in Colombia in 1930, Daniel Camargo Barbosa had a pretty troubling childhood. Prevented from furthering his education by financial constraints, Barbosa eventually fell into a life of crime. He began with petty thefts before escalating into abducting, assaulting, and murdering young girls. Barbosa first went to prison in Colombia, where it is believed that he claimed the lives of more than 80 girls. He escaped from prison and fled to Ecuador, where he continued his despicable actions, later owning up to 72 murders in the country. Barbosa was incarcerated for 16 years, but his sentence was cut short just 5 years in when he was killed by another inmate, who happened to be one of his victim's nephews. Lenko Latkov. Between 1999 and 2000, Lenko Latkov committed 3 murders in the Khaskovo province of the People's Republic of Bulgaria. All of his victims were elderly women, although he also targeted young boys and girls, who he apparently only assaulted. Latkov was suspected of carrying out 3 other murders, but none of them was confirmed before his death. Prior to his trial, he first received psychological evaluations before being transferred to a prison where he was held. Latkov never got the opportunity to answer for his crimes. On the 13th of September 2003, his cellmate, Sami Behram Abdullah, who had been locked up for attempted murder, succeeded in killing him following a heated argument. Lloyd Avery II. You may know Lloyd Avery II from John Singleton's seminal film Boys in the Hood. While he didn't have a large role, it was an important one, as he was one of the Bloods who shoots and kills Ricky Baker. Later, Ice Cube avenges Ricky and kills Avery in a drive-by. 8 years after the movie came out, Avery was sentenced to life in prison after murdering 2 people in a shooting. He was placed in Pelican Bay State Prison alongside cellmate Kevin Roby, a Satanist who was serving time for killing his own sister. On September 4th, 2005, Roby strangled Avery to death, supposedly after Avery tried converting Roby to Christianity.
Yo, cuz. I know why you got the call last night. Shouldn't have been there in the first place.
Elio José Muniz Filho. Elio José Muniz Filho, or Elinho as he was more commonly called, was imprisoned for 201 years for the deaths of 65 people. Born and raised in Pernambuco, Brazil, Elinho was a vigilante killer who sought to, quote, clean up the city by taking out people he deemed to be evil. No matter how good his intentions may have been, this was considered a crime in the eyes of the law, and he was arrested in 1998. Elinho's actions seemed to have won him favor among the residents of the town, as over 3,000 people reportedly signed a petition demanding his release. While serving his sentence, however, he was violently attacked by 3 inmates and later died of his injuries at a hospital. Artur Kitaev. Just as the Soviet Union fell in the early 1990s, Artur Kitaev embarked on a spree of sex crimes and murders. This earned him the nickname Last Sex Maniac of the USSR. During that period, Kitaev had gotten a job as a driver for an auto company. With his official vehicle, he preyed on young female hitchhikers around the city of Smolensk, claiming the lives of 6 of them. Kitaev was arrested in July of 1992 and sentenced to death 2 years later, although this was eventually commuted to a life term. The Russian killer remained in prison until September 2019, when an argument with his cellmate ended in a brutal attack that ultimately resulted in Kitaev's demise. Thor Nis Christensen.
Thor Christensen terrified a town.
No conscience whatsoever. Zero.
Born in Denmark, Thor Nis Christensen was brought to the U.S. by his parents at the age of 5. Although a bright student in high school, Christensen later lost interest in his studies and dropped out to work at a gas station. Around this time, he began harboring despicable thoughts, which he then made a reality after stealing a pistol from a friend. He was responsible for the deaths of 4 women, but his murderous spree came to an end when his intended 5th victim survived the ordeal and led the police to him months later.
This guy thinks what he did was all right.
While serving a life sentence at Folsom State Prison, Christensen was wounded in the exercise yard by an unidentified prisoner and later succumbed to his injuries. John Gagan.
So how can I help you guys?
You're familiar with the Gagan case?
Sure. 80 plaintiffs, all of them individual cases.
It was the investigation into John Gagan that opened the floodgates for the Catholic Church abuse allegations that permeated the 2000s. Gagan was a Roman Catholic priest who was accused of horrible crimes throughout the greater Boston area. Following a thorough investigation into the countless allegations, Gagan was convicted of sexual abuse and sentenced to 10 years in prison in the Sousa Baranowski Correctional Center. While there, he met Joseph Druce, a murderer who had been abused in boarding school. Desiring revenge against Gagan and what he represented, Druce confronted the ex-priest in his cell, jammed the door closed, and proceeded to stomp him to death.
Baron wants us to scrub the Gagan case. That's great.
Can we cover Gagan?
Yeah, there's a lawyer alleging Cardinal Law knew about it.
Léopold Zion. The crimes of Léopold Zion are pretty tragic. Not only because they involve the deaths of 4 people and the assault of many others, but because a large number of them could have been prevented. Zion had been convicted twice of crimes involving assault, but in both cases, he was released early by a parole board. He later succeeded in cutting short the lives of 4 young boys before he was arrested again, this time for good. Zion was convicted of just 1 murder and received the death penalty, although this was later commuted to a life sentence. He was attacked and killed in prison by a fellow inmate, who was acquitted of the crime on the basis of insanity. Leroy Martin. Born and raised in Gaffney, South Carolina, Leroy Martin lived a seemingly normal life. He worked in a textile mill and had a wife and 3 children. Behind that facade, though, was a maniac who rained terror on women in the area and was responsible for the deaths of 4 people.
And I was getting a little eerie feeling as we got deeper in the woods, and finally one of the deputies said, "Here she is," and she was covered up with some brush.
After placing 2 calls himself to a newspaper editor, Martin was spotted close to a crime scene by 2 local residents and was later arrested by police.
You tell the sheriff his boys better catch me real soon or I'm gonna take me another one.
Why don't you just turn yourself in?
Nah, y'all gonna have to hunt me down and shoot me dead like the dog I am.
He was sentenced to 4 consecutive life terms, but only served about 4 years before he was put out of his misery by another inmate at the Central Correctional Institution in South Carolina.
Part of him wanted to be caught. I think another part of him enjoyed the publicity. He would get up every morning and go down to a local cafe and get copies of all the papers and read and talk about the strangler.
Charles Schmid.
National media pounced, including Playboy and Life magazine, all to see the man, the murderer, with a personality bigger than life.
The Pied Piper of Tucson, Charles Schmid was a serial killer who claimed the lives of 3 young ladies in the 1960s. Schmid was known for hanging out with a group of teenagers in the Tucson area, and when he wanted to know what taking a life would feel like, he sought his victims within that group.
It was May 31st, 1964, when Schmid decided to fulfill a long-time desire to see what it would feel like to kill.
In the end, it was one of those same friends who was instrumental in helping the police build a winning case against him.
Richie Bruns got probation and was sent to Ohio, so he
was so jittery, he called his father and told him all about what he knew about Schmid and the deaths.
After successfully escaping from the Arizona State Prison in 1972, Schmid was recaptured and sent back, where he met his end just 3 years later in a horrific attack by 2 other inmates. Robert Pickton.
One of the country's most notorious prisoners is dead. Robert Pickton has died from injuries sustained earlier in the month in a Quebec prison assault.
One of the most notorious serial killers in Canadian history, Robert Pickton was convicted of murdering 6 people, although he was charged with 21 and later confessed to 49. He mostly targeted sex workers in downtown Vancouver, picking them up and taking them to his pig farm, where he would kill and dispose of them. He was sentenced to life in prison and served his time in Quebec's Port Cartier institution. On May 19, 2024, Pickton was reportedly stabbed in the head with a broken broom handle by prisoner Martin Charret. He was rushed to the hospital and put on life support, but he died of his injuries 12 days later.
Well, as you said, I mean, Pickton was in that medically induced coma and on life support after he was attacked in what was described as a major assault by another inmate at that maximum security institution about 450 kilometers northeast of Quebec City.
James Whitey Bulger.
At the age of 14, Bulger had his first brush with the law, arrested and setting up a lifetime of being on the wrong side of the law.
Once the most wanted fugitive in America, James Whitey Bulger was an infamous mob boss who controlled the Winter Hill Gang in Somerville, Massachusetts. He also worked as an FBI informant for many years, which, unsurprisingly, did not make him many friends among his criminal associates. Bulger lived as a fugitive for 17 years, but was finally arrested in 2011 and handed 2 consecutive life sentences for his notorious crimes, including murder.
Whitey Bulger was found guilty on 31 counts, including both racketeering charges, and was found to have been involved in 11 murders.
He bounced around multiple prisons before being sent to the United States Penitentiary in Hazleton, West Virginia on October 29, 2018. In less than 24 hours, Bulger was ambushed by several inmates and left for dead in an unrecognizable state.
Investigative reporter Eric Rasmussen found out Bulger is the 3rd prisoner killed at that facility just this year.
Donald Harvey. While working as a hospital orderly in Ohio and Kentucky, Donald Harvey was responsible for the deaths of a self-proclaimed 87 people.
He was quite bizarre, and on certain levels, raised some doubts as to whether or not this guy was reciting some sort of fantasy.
Harvey employed several methods in what he deemed as a mercy killing of his patients, including the use of poisons, suffocation, and withholding essential medications.
They do narrow the list to 10 possible victims. All died of illnesses that could be a cover for poisons like arsenic, a substance found in large quantities at Harvey's apartment.
He pleaded guilty to 37 murders to avoid the death penalty and was sentenced to life imprisonment. But when you describe yourself as an angel of death, chances are you're bound to get a taste of your own medicine at some point. This came in the form of James Elliott, a fellow inmate at the Toledo Correctional Institution in Ohio, who descended upon Harvey, being familiar with his crimes.
He placed himself in that position. I really don't have much compassion for him. He's, I said back then, and I'd say today, if he ever had gotten out, he would have continued to kill people.
Richard Loeb.
I think that the murder said something to people about American society. This was seen as a culmination of trends that were dangerous, that were immoral.
Richard Loeb and Nathan Leopold were 2 extremely intelligent students born to wealthy parents and fantasized about committing the perfect murder.
Wealthy, well-educated teenagers who had done it, they said, for the sheer thrill.
They found their victim in the young Bobby Franks, who paid the ultimate price on May 21st, 1924. The 2 got rid of the body, but mistakenly dropped a pair of eyeglasses at the scene, which were traced back to Leopold.
They found that only 3 pairs of eyeglasses with that hinge had been sold in the Chicago district.
They managed to evade the death penalty and were sentenced to life imprisonment instead. But while Leopold maintained a stellar record through his sentence and was eventually granted parole in 1958, Loeb's story took a gruesome turn. He met his end at the hands of another prisoner at the Stateville Penitentiary in Illinois, who viciously attacked him in the shower. Albert DeSalvo.
They were young and old, black and white. As the number of victims grew, police became more and more frustrated.
1960s Boston, Massachusetts was terrorized by two criminals. One, dubbed the Boston Strangler, who killed 13 women, and the Green Man, who broke into women's homes and assaulted them.
The grisly headline-grabbing crimes had some comparing the Boston Strangler to Jack the Ripper.
As police launched an investigation into the Green Man's activities, they were pointed towards Albert DeSalvo, whom they arrested and charged with the crimes. While in custody, DeSalvo confessed to also being the Boston Strangler, but due to a lack of physical evidence, he was only tried for the Green Man allegations. DeSalvo was serving a life sentence when he died after being wounded by another inmate in the prison infirmary. Decades later, DNA evidence obtained from one of the victims would prove that DeSalvo was, in fact, the Boston Strangler.
It would appear to definitively determine, in fact, that Albert DeSalvo was the killer of Mary Sullivan.
Jeffrey Dahmer.
Jeffrey Dahmer was responsible for killing more than a dozen people. The majority of those murders happened in an apartment near the Marquette campus.
One of the most infamous serial killers to ever walk the earth, Jeffrey Dahmer was responsible for the deaths of 17 young men. His spree came to an end in July 1991 when an intended victim escaped from Dahmer's apartment and led the police back to him. He pleaded guilty to all the charges leveled against him and received 15 consecutive life sentences in Wisconsin and an additional one in Ohio. In prison, Dahmer was reportedly unremorseful for his crimes, which reportedly infuriated the aforementioned Christopher Scarver, resulting in an attack in the prison gym that left Dahmer dead. When news of his death reached the public, Dahmer's mother asked, quote, "Now is everybody happy?"
To many, including Dahmer's own attorney, it comes as little surprise.
I wasn't shocked because I thought that Jeffrey Dahmer would end up this way.
Scarver also killed Jesse Anderson, another convicted murderer, who just happened to be in the gym at the same time.
At his first court appearance, Scarver entered the courtroom singing.
Rain or shine, sharing your dreams.
What do you make of these stories?
I believe in God too. But my God is a God of vengeance.
All right, well, that's going to do it for this chilling look at the reality of prison. Thanks for watching. I've been Matt from Watch Mojo, and I'll see you next time.